I was sprinkling cinnamon over the warm apple tart when Evan walked into the kitchen, said nothing, and placed a leather notebook in front of me as if it were a court summons. When I opened it, I saw only one sentence colder than the ocean wind outside the window. Apologize to Lana. Tonight. Evan looked at me. His eyes no longer those of a husband but of someone who had already decided to erase me from his life. If you don't apologize to Lana, then don't come home. My hand froze. Not because of fear, but because in the reflection on his phone screen, I saw the photo Lana sent, that smile, waiting for the moment I would fall. But they didn't know one thing. I have never been the kind of woman who collapses before a lie. I still remember that first evening, not because of what Evan said, but because of the lightness running through my chest when he smiled at me in that room, full of unfamiliar voices and laughter. We met at an environmental fundraising event, where everyone talked about climate change or community projects I never thought would have anything to do with my life. Yet amid the clinking glasses, the sound of heels tapping on the wooden floor, and the warm yellow lights falling over the sponsorship maps on the walls, Evan stood there calm, unpretentious, not trying to stand out. Just a man who looked at me as if he genuinely wanted to hear my answer. Not the story he was waiting to jump in with. I like honest women, he said. And I hate anything related to drama. I laughed not because it was funny, but because it hit exactly what I'd always believed about myself. For years, I tried to avoid conflict, tried to keep the peace, tried to be the easygoing, pleasant woman people expected. Hearing Evan say that made me think I'd finally met someone who understood me without needing me to explain. We began talking in a tone lower than everyone else in the room, as if the loud gala had been lifted away from the two of us. The lights reflecting from the ceiling fixtures shimmered across the table where we stood, and I remember thinking his eyes looked like the ocean at sunset, warm enough to draw me in, yet mysterious enough to make me keep a small distance, the way someone stands before a beautiful but unpredictable sea. Then the first dates came so gently it felt like they had always belonged on my schedule. Coffee at a small seaside cafe, walks under the pine trees on the trail, leading to the rocky shore, evenings watching nature documentaries together just to laugh at how unnecessarily deep the narrator's voice was. There was no overwhelming moment. But each time we met, it left a warmth like a sun-kissed towel, making me think this was the peace people always talked about. 2 years later, we bought the beach house, a light blue home with white windows and a gray roof, just like the houses I used to draw as a child. When we moved in, I opened every door wide to let the ocean breeze rush in, carrying the salty scent and the steady sound of waves, as if the sea itself was breathing with us. Life back then was beautifully simple. In the morning I worked at the wooden desk facing the ocean. In the afternoon he jogged along the coastal trail. And in the evening we cooked or listened to the playlists he called music that bothers no one. I believed I had chosen the right man, believed that peace was real. And then Lana appeared. I don't remember exactly when I first met Lana within my marriage, maybe during a casual weekend dinner, or maybe when Evan suddenly stepped out to take a call, leaving me alone at a half-finished table. But I remember the feeling of someone walking into the home I had built with bricks of trust, and doing it as if she had her own key. Lana was his best friend from high school, Evan said. Someone who knows him better than anyone. I didn't object. Everyone has best friends, I do too. But from the first conversations I overheard, I realized Lana knew things I had never heard, very personal, very old, yet intimate in a way I wasn't a part of. Like the way she recounted the time Evan had a panic episode before a major exam, or the way she mentioned an old teacher's name with a tone that told me they had spent a lot of time together that year. Nothing wrong with it. But something not right. Then I accidentally saw Evan's anxiety medication on a shelf in Lana's house when I stopped by one evening. He told me not to worry. I just forgot it there, but I remembered clearly that he always kept it in the third drawer of his desk at home. He was meticulous, sometimes overly so. That's why, forgot it there. Slipped past my ear, like a stone thrown across still water, leaving ripples I couldn't ignore. A few weeks later, I woke up at 3 a.m., to the sound of Evan's phone vibrating. He walked out of the bedroom, whispered, "Yeah, I'm here," and closed the door, leaving me lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the waves crashing against the cliffs, wondering what made a woman call a married man at that hour. When he came back, I asked gently, Was it Lana? He paused for a second, then nodded. She couldn't sleep. I was just reassuring her. Just a little, a call at 3 a.m. I wanted to say it crossed a line that if anyone called me at that hour, the first person I'd tell would be my husband, not my best friend, but looking at his tired face in the nightlight. I stayed quiet. He was exhausted. I didn't want to be the wife who picked a fight. Evan insisted. You're too sensitive. Lana's just dealing with some mental issues. I stayed silent, and in that silence, I chose to trust him. I chose to believe everything was just a misunderstanding, that Lana was struggling, that Evan was only helping her the way he said. That trust was like a thin cloth. I kept stretching it to cover the small distortions, hoping it would be wide enough to hide the things that unsettled me. But slowly, the distortions grew too large to cover. Dinners interrupted by a flood of messages. The spare key Evan suddenly handed to Lana, just in case. The way he checked his phone and deleted messages the moment I entered the room. No moment was big or obvious. But together, they made me feel like I was standing in my own familiar home, while the ground beneath my feet quietly split. I still tried to stay calm. I kept telling myself everyone has close relationships. I kept telling myself this peaceful life couldn't fall apart because of a third person. I told myself that so often that I no longer knew whether I was keeping the marriage alive or holding on to a beautiful illusion I had painted, until one night, when Evan whispered behind his office door, "If she finds out, everything will end." I stood outside, my hand on the frame, listening to his quick breaths like someone trapped between two impossible choices. I stepped back, walked quietly like a thief in my own home. When I returned to bed, I lay beside him with a heartbeat no longer steady, faster, heavier, as if trying to warn me that the truth was close. I didn't know when I started hearing Evan's phone vibrate the way people hear storm alarms. That sound, once a soft buzz, became something that jolted me at dinner or sank my heart even when he picked up his phone just to check the time. Maybe because I had seen enough to understand. That vibration was no longer meant for me. The night he rushed to the balcony during my birthday party, I still remember the candlelight from the cake waiting to be blown out, casting a warmth tinged with sadness across my face. Guests were still cheerful, my best friend was pouring more wine, and I, the guest of honor, sat alone, staring at the balcony door closing behind Evan. 40 minutes. Not long enough to be obviously suspicious, but long enough for people to start giving me sympathetic looks. I heard someone whisper, "Must be urgent work." Another forced a smile. Men always have something come up. His eyes shifted toward me, not open anger, but something tightened inside, like a warning. "Aurora. What are you saying?" Lana asked, her voice still pleasant but her eyes narrowing slightly. I didn't have a chance to answer before Evan cut in. "She's just joking." Lana, an hour. Then he pulled me to the corner of the room, smiling at everyone as if nothing had happened, but his hand on my waist was so stiff I felt like I was just a shadow he dragged along for the sake of appearances. When the car door closed and it was only the two of us in the silent dark cabin, everything exploded. "What the hell were you doing in there?" Evan growled, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. I had never seen him like that. He was always calm, always composed, always polite no matter what. But this time, he looked like someone backed into a corner. "I just asked a question." "I didn't know. You ruined a hundreds of thousands of dollars opportunity for Lana." Evan cut me off, his voice almost breaking. "Do you know how long it took her to get to that position? Do you know the pressure she's under? Why are you this emotional about Lana's job?" I asked quietly, keeping my voice low so I wouldn't add fuel to whatever was burning inside him. Evan exhaled sharply, as if trying to steady himself. "Because you don't understand. Lana worked so hard for this. You shouldn't have said that in front of everyone." "Then tell me, so I can understand." He turned his face toward the window. "You don't need to understand, you just need to apologize to her." Those last 3 words, to apologize, fell like a final period. I stayed silent because I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear. But fear of what? I wasn't sure. As the car turned onto the coastal road, the pale yellow streetlights slid across Evan's face. I looked at him in profile. and in that brief moment, I saw the twitch in his jaw, his knuckles whitening around the steering wheel, and his eyes fixed on the road, yet seeming to look at something far behind it. I opened my mouth to ask but stopped. One wrong question now wouldn't solve anything, it would only push us farther apart. When we got home, Evan went to his office, and I stood alone in the kitchen, the warm light falling over the wooden counter where I always made tea each night. I sat down, listening to the waves outside crashing against the cliffs. The waves were steady. But in my mind, another sound echoed. Evan's voice in the car, trembling when he said, "Hundreds of thousands of dollars." How could a man care that much about another woman's career? Why did one careless sentence from me make him react as if the whole world were falling apart? I closed my eyes, connecting everything that had happened over the past months: the late-night calls, the hurriedly deleted messages, the necklace receipt. And now, the anger laced with panic. There was something much bigger behind all this, something heavy enough to make Evan react almost out of control when I accidentally hit the right nerve. I stood up, walking slowly toward the hallway that led to his office. The light spilling from the door was only a thin line, but I could see Evan's back bent over his desk, both hands holding his head like someone trying to contain something about to burst out. I stopped at the doorway. Just stood there, looking at the man I once thought I knew better than anyone. And I realized this was no longer about jealousy. No longer about small insecurities. Evan was carrying something enormous, something that had nothing to do with love. And the world I thought I was living in seemed to have been misunderstood by me from the very beginning. I turned around and went back to the bedroom, my steps light as if afraid of breaking something fragile between us. But inside me rose a strange feeling. A feeling I didn't have a name for then, but later realized was intuition. That my marriage wasn't cracking. It was drifting toward another shore, and I, though I didn't know what I would find, had already begun walking toward it. That afternoon started like any other. My laptop suddenly shut down while I was sending tax documents to a client. I needed the quickest solution. Use Evan's computer. He always said I could use it anytime. We don't have secrets. I opened it on the kitchen counter. The sound of waves drifting through the slightly open window like the house's breath. I only intended to take a few minutes to send the files, but the moment I opened the browser, a strange folder caught my attention. Project L, W, 3 simple letters, yet they made my whole body freeze. L, W, Lana Whitmore, not a coincidence. Not a mistaken folder. Evan never named files randomly. I clicked it. Inside were 4 main items. Audio, 17 min. Therapy, LW. PDF, Witness Statement, 2016. Backup, only if needed. No work documents, no marketing campaigns, no advertising files. Only things completely unrelated to Evan's profession. I opened the audio file first. The 17 minutes began with heavy breathing and shaky inhales like someone pulled out of a nightmare. Then Lana's voice came on, hoarse, broken, almost desperate. "Evan, if you say anything, I lose everything." No pauses, no circling around. Just the raw panic of someone clinging to another person like a final lifeline. Evan replied in a low voice, "I'll keep my word. I told you I would. You owe me. You know that, right?" That night, her voice broke. A sob hit directly into my ear. "You told me you wouldn't let anyone find out. You can't go back on it. You promised. You promised. Evan. You believe me. Right. I know." A chair scraped softly. "Someone probably stood up then," Evan added. "Aurora doesn't know anything. I won't let her find out." I turned off the computer. As if someone had slammed a door right in front of me, I switched to the therapy file. The doctor's notes chilled me. Patient L. W. experiences extreme anxiety when referencing the 2016 event, believes she is being watched or about to be exposed. Shows tendencies to manipulate the emotions of close relations to maintain safety. Another page read, "Recommend further evaluation as patient may be hiding the truth about an incident related to a traffic accident." An accident, 2016, the exact time Evan and Lana were still in North Haven. I opened the witness statement next. The date, time, and location were written clearly. 11:40 p.m., heavy rain, a blonde woman, showing signs of intoxication, leaving the scene in a silver car. The silver car. Evan once had one. He sold it a few months after we got married. I heard the waves outside shift, hitting the rocks harder like the sound of my heartbeat trying to stay steady. The final folder was backup, only if needed. Inside, photos of text messages between Evan and Lana over many years, several other audio files, shorter ones, a repair receipt from Evan's auto shop on the night after the accident. Evan wasn't cheating. He didn't betray me in the usual way, and he was protecting Lana not out of love, but out of fear of the consequences. A sound at the kitchen door startled me. Evan had just walked in, holding a grocery bag. "Did you find the files?" he asked. His voice light but his eyes immediately scanning the open laptop. I closed it. Evan froze for a split second. Very small. But enough for someone who had lived with him for 7 years to notice. "Yes, I sent everything," I replied. He set the bag down, touching the edge of the counter as if to steady himself. "Your laptop really broke?" "Yes. Could you check it for me tonight?" Evan nodded. But his eyes never left the closed laptop. "Was any file hard to find?" he asked, trying to sound casual but raising his voice slightly at the end. Not the question of someone concerned, but of someone trying to figure out what I had seen. I walked past him, opened the cabinet, and took out a glass. "No, I just needed to upload the documents to the tax portal." "Aurora. If something is bothering you, you can ask me." I put the glass down, not looking at him. "I'm not bothered, just check my laptop." Evan turned on the faucet, but his hand overfilled the glass, something he had never done before. He was tense, very clearly, and I knew he was weighing it, confess or wait for me to speak first. That night, Evan slept outside in the living room. He didn't come into the bedroom. Nor did he call out to me like he usually did after an argument. His footsteps paced unevenly, sometimes stopping right at my door, as if he were about to knock. Then didn't. I lay still, not trying to sleep, listening to the change in his movements, heavier, faster. Something like fear, not fear of losing me. Fear of me knowing, fear of the secret cracking open. Fear that the night in 2016 he covered for Lana would surface like an old shipwreck rising from the sea. Around midnight, I heard him stop at my door, his breath held as if listening to see whether I was asleep, then his footsteps walked away. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, not because I hadn't slept, but because something smoldering inside me was pushing. If I didn't see this through, that secret would swallow my whole life. The kitchen still smelled like the coffee Evan made the night before. His cup still had his lip mark, but he had left for work earlier than usual. I sat at the dining table, opened my notebook, and wrote exactly 3 words, North Haven, 2016. That was the place mentioned in the witness statement on Evan's laptop, a small town near the woods, where Evan and Lana had lived early in their careers. I opened the map and found the accident site. Just looking at the turns, something felt wrong. The crash happened on a curve along the lake edge, pitch black at night, and known for being dangerous because it had no lighting. I drove out, the sky still misty. The road to North Haven took more than 2 hours, but my whole body felt pulled in that direction. When I arrived, the tiny town appeared through a thin layer of fog, quiet as if time had forgotten it. I parked in front of an old diner with "Since 1959" painted on the front. Inside were only a few older folks sipping their morning coffee like they had every day of their lives. I walked in. The doorbell chimed. A middle-aged woman with silver curls looked at me, smiling kindly. "You can sit anywhere, dear." I chose a table by the window. When she brought out my coffee, she paused for a moment, her eyes scanning my face as though trying to remember if she knew me. I asked directly, without circling around, "I want to ask about the accident on the lake curve in 2016. Someone died that night. Do you remember?" The server's expression changed immediately. Not fear, something like a memory no one had touched in years. She set the pot down slowly. "That accident, everyone here remembers it. The man drove into a marker post and went into the lake. They pulled the car up, but he didn't make it. Did they ever find the person who caused it? She shook her head. No. It was pitch black in the rain. A witness said they saw a woman run away, then disappear. A silver car. But they couldn't get the plate number. After that, the police just let the matter sink. No one was arrested. The man who died. Did he have family? Yes. A son 20 years old back then. Poor kid. My breath slowed. What was his name? She answered without thinking. Walter Green. I had once heard Lana on the phone with someone named Jacob Green right in my house. On a night when Evan told me she was stressed. Don't ask. Jacob Green, the victim's son. I looked out the window. The mist was lifting. The picture in my mind was sharpening line by line. Leaving the diner, I drove to the lake curve. The place was cold and still, like a period at the end of a long sentence. The water was flat, reflecting the gray sky. A car falling into this spot on a rainy night no one would survive. A terrified woman running away, a witness who saw but didn't remember the face. I stood silently at the road's edge. The silver car was the same one Evan once drove. The one he sold just after our wedding. It couldn't be a coincidence. On the drive back, I called one person, an old colleague who used to work in auto insurance in North Haven. I told her I needed information about the car Evan used to own. She sighed. Aurora, this is tricky. Evan sold the car privately, not through a dealership. The records are old. But I'll try. Half an hour later, I stopped at a gas station along the highway. Has message came through. Evan's car had heavy front right damage. Repair date matches the month of the 2016 accident. There was no denying anything anymore. When I got home, Evan was already there. He stood in the living room like someone waiting for a verdict. His shirt still creased from sitting rigid all day. He watched me walk in, his eyes stripped of their usual confidence. Where did you go? He asked, his voice low, cautious. I set my keys down. North Haven. Evan closed his eyes for a moment. A small reaction. But clear enough to know he understood exactly how far I had gone. Aurora. You shouldn't have. Shouldn't have known. I cut him off. That accident. Lana caused it. Evan stayed silent. The answer was in that silence. Say it. Evan stepped back. As if standing near me made it harder to breathe. That night I was driving behind Lana. We'd just left an old party. It was raining, Lana had drunk, a lot. I told her to stay and rest, but she wouldn't listen. He swallowed, his throat tight. At the lake curve, she turned too fast. The car coming the other way swerved to avoid her. And went into the lake. You called for help, called the police? I asked. Evan shook his head slightly, as if confessing the most shameful thing in his life. Lana panicked. She said, if she got caught, she'd do something terrible to herself. She begged me. Begged me. And you let the victim die in the car. Evan clenched his hands until his knuckles whitened. I went into the lake. I tried to pull the door open, but the water was already full. I couldn't save him. When I got back to shore, Lana said if I told the truth, she said she'd hurt herself right in front of me. A cold heaviness slid down my spine like someone had placed a stone on it. What happened after that? Evan looked at me. His eyes filled with exhaustion, fear, and something even worse, the self-loathing that had eaten him alive for 7 years. You stayed silent. Because you loved her. Evan shook his head immediately. No. I was afraid of her. His voice cracked. Aurora. I never loved Lana. But she knows how to use fear to trap me. She always brings up that night. Always says I owe her, and every time she wants something, I have to help. The eyes of the man I once loved were empty in a frightening way. I didn't cheat, Aurora. Not in the way you think. I was trapped. I stood there, saying nothing for a long moment. One thing was painfully clear. It wasn't only Evan who feared Lana. The whole old town was afraid. The victim's family feared the truth. And Lana was so terrified of being exposed she was willing to drag Evan down with her, and I was afraid of something else, afraid I would never get out if I kept standing still. Evan looked at me like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. I'm begging you. Don't tell anyone. This. You don't understand. I understand more than you think. And I won't stay silent anymore. I knew exactly what I had to do. I walked into the hallway and grabbed my coat. Evan followed, looking exhausted. Aurora. Please, don't make this worse. I turned and looked straight into his eyes. I'm not trying to make it worse, Evan. I'm trying to fix it. He sighed, his shoulders collapsing like someone whose strength had just been drained. But he didn't ask anything else. I walked out and closed the door softly behind me. Outside, the ocean wind was strong, carrying the salt and chill of early October. I went straight to the car, sat in the driver's seat, and opened my phone. There were 3 names I needed to contact, 3 people who deserved this truth more than anyone. The victim's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Green, a private investigator, Marcus Hale, Noah Green, the victim's son, now a police officer. I started with the first, Mrs. Green's voice was raspy, older than when I heard it earlier in the diner. Hello, ma'am, this is Aurora. I met you this morning. At the diner. A pause. You want to ask more about my husband? No, ma'am. I want to talk about his accident. I heard her take a deep breath. You have information? Yes, ma'am. And it's important. Very important. But I need to say it in person, because it involves many people, and because I want to do the right thing. Mrs. Green answered slowly but firmly. It's been 7 years. The girl's family never apologized. The police didn't either. If you want to come, then come tomorrow. We'll be waiting. Next, I called the private investigator, Marcus Hale. I'm listening, he said. His voice low, dry, the tone of someone familiar with lies. I need you to verify a car collision from 2016. And find out whether any cameras recorded the area. A 7-year-old case. That's tough. That's why I need you. I'll send the exact location, time, and some data. Enough for you to know this isn't a pointless request. After a moment he replied, all right. Send it over. I'll prioritize this. Then I called Noah Green. He picked up on the 3rd ring, his voice guarded. This is Noah Green. Who is this? I know about your father's accident. I need to meet you today. Silence filled the line, not the silence of doubt, but the silence of someone who had waited 7 years to hear those words. Where? He asked. I gave him the address of a cafe by the coast. I'll be there in 20 minutes. That afternoon, I sat across from Noah in the small wooden cafe. Sunlight streamed through the window onto the table between us. Noah had a hardened face, deep eyes, and the posture of someone who had endured more loss than his age should allow. What do you have for me? He asked directly. I placed a USB drive in front of him. Inside is a recording between Lana Whitmore and my husband, along with Lana's therapy notes, and Evan's car repair report. From the same week your father died. Noah stared at me long enough that I felt completely exposed. Why are you doing this? What's your connection to Lana? I'm just someone who stayed silent for too long. Noah narrowed his eyes. What do you want from me? I want the truth to be spoken. Nothing more. Nothing less. He tilted his head slightly. And you want me there tonight? Yes. At Lana's house. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched, not a smile, but a quiet agreement. I'll be there. That evening I went to Lana's house, just as Evan wanted, but not in the way Evan imagined. The sky darkened earlier than usual. In the warm glow spilling from Lana's porch lights, I saw her pacing through the living room. Looking as tense as someone who had spent the whole day on edge, Evan was already there, standing near the window. His hand kept brushing his collar, his habit whenever he was afraid. I stepped inside. Lana smirked. I didn't think you'd dare come. I replied calmly. I came to do what Evan asked. A thin flicker of hope flashed in Evan's eyes. Aurora. I'm going to apologize. I cut him off. Just. In my own way. The room froze. Lana folded her arms. Go ahead. I slowly knelt down, right in the center of the brightly lit living room. Lana looked at me like she had just won the final round. Evan stepped forward, worry tightening his face. I lifted my head, my voice clear enough that no one in the room could mistake it. I'm sorry for staying silent about the crime the two of you committed. The room went dead quiet, as if all the air had been drained from it. What did you say? Lana hissed. I stood up, opened my bag, and placed Evan's laptop on the glass table. I brought something to apologize with. A soft knock sounded at the door behind me. Noah walked in, carrying the calm of someone prepared for the worst. Evan stepped back, while Lana's face turned pale. What are you doing here? Lana snapped. To hear your explanation, Noah replied, his voice cold as steel. I pressed play on the recording. Lana's crying voice spilled into the room, so clear no one could deny it. The sentence, if you say anything, I'll lose everything, cut through the house like a blade. Evan hung his head, his hands clenching. Lana lunged forward. Evan. Turn it off. I said turn it off, but Evan didn't move. He was frozen, as if the weight he had carried for 7 years had finally broken him in an instant. Noah stood still, his eyes red but his voice steady. So? This is the truth. Lana backed away, mumbling. No. No. That's not what happened. Evan. Tell him. Evan spoke only one sentence. I can't cover for you anymore. The light in Lana's eyes extinguished. I slowly closed the laptop. I came, Lana. But not to apologize to you. I came to free myself. The silence after the recording lasted so long I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Each tick felt like it was counting the pieces of our lives about to change direction. Lana stood braced against the dining table, her fingers gripping the wooden edge until they turned white, her eyes wild with panic. Evan kept his head lowered, his body drained of all strength, while Noah stood in the center of the room, his gaze fixed on Lana like a verdict that needed no written words. You. Noah spoke, not loudly, but with a tone sharp enough to make Lana jerk her head up. Do you want to say anything? Lana swallowed dryly. I didn't mean to. It was an accident. I panicked. My father died in that panic, Noah said, his voice steady but cutting like a blade. Lana stepped back. I was just trying to survive. Evan knows I was being abused back then. I had no one. Her excuses were scattered, tangled, weightless. People who finally face the truth always share one trait. When everything cracks open, they no longer know what to hold on to. Evan stepped forward half a step, his voice hoarse. Lana. Enough. Evan, don't. Lana grabbed his wrist like someone drowning, reaching for the first arm they could find. You promised me. You promised you wouldn't let anyone know. Evan pulled his hand back gently but firmly. That was the biggest mistake of my life. Lana let out a broken laugh, trembling, distorted. You're saying that because of her, Evan. She didn't finish. Noah stepped in front of her and placed a document on the table. A summons. You'll give an official statement. The investigation will be reopened. Lana froze, her shoulders collapsing. No. I'll lose everything. I can't survive if. Noah cut her off. You should have thought about that 7 years ago. When Noah left with Lana, the house fell into a new kind of silence, not tense, but suffocating all the same. Evan stayed still for a long moment, his hands braced on his knees like someone who had run a long distance and suddenly realized his legs could no longer hold him. I walked to the window, leaning lightly against the wooden frame. Outside, the ocean wind hissed through the trees, the air foggy, the streetlight casting a pale, cold glow. Evan spoke first, as if he couldn't bear the silence between us. Aurora. I'm sorry. I turned to look at him. No anger, no panic of someone who has been hurt. Evan took a step forward. You don't know what that weight did to me. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus, I couldn't. You don't have to explain, I said softly. I understand now. He placed his hand on the counter, as if needing support. I know you're angry. But please, don't leave. We can fix this. We can start over. I need you. Those 4 words, I need you, had softened me so many times over 7 years. But now, they passed through me like a thin breeze, because for the first time, I saw Evan clearly, not the idealized husband, not the victim trapped by Lana, but a man who had lived 2 lives in one body. One life in the light with me, one life in the shadows because of Lana. I stepped closer, standing right in front of him, close enough to feel his breath against my shoulder. Evan looked at me like a man terrified of losing the last important thing he had. Aurora. I'm begging you. I'll do anything you want. Just don't leave. I tilted my head, my voice gentler than I expected it to be. I freed you from Lana, but who frees me from this marriage? The sentence fell between us like a cut, sharp and exact. Evan froze, lips pressed together, eyes widening like someone jolted awake from a long delusion. After a long moment, he shook his head slightly. I can change, I promise. Evan, the issue isn't whether you change, I replied slowly. It's that the truth came too late. Not because I don't want to forgive you, but because at this point, I don't want to keep trying alone anymore. He stepped back half a pace, his shoulders drooping. His eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. Evan had never allowed himself to cry in front of me. Don't leave, Aurora. Please. I looked around the house, the framed photos from when we first married, the sofa with the worn armrest because Evan always sat in that corner, the wooden kitchen where I once set apple tarts still warm with cinnamon. All those things had once been a home. But when trust breaks, a house becomes nothing more than 4 walls that know too many secrets. I opened the closet and took the smallest bag I owned. No clothes, no jewelry, no documents, just my wallet and car keys. Evan's voice cracked. You're leaving now. Yes. Leaving while I'm still calm. Will you come back? He asked. His voice thin as a thread. I paused at the doorway, placing my hand on the old wooden frame we had repainted together one Sunday afternoon. The paint was still there, but my hand no longer belonged to this place. I don't know, I said honestly. I just know that if I stay, I won't be myself anymore. Evan lurched forward half a step, then stopped as if held back by something invisible. Aurora, I love you. That confession came so late it no longer had the power to save anything. It was like a drop of water falling onto a frozen lake. I turned away, hand on the door handle, my voice calm. Evan, love can't make up for 7 years of fear you gave to someone else. The night wind slipped in, carrying the salty smell of the sea and the cold breath of a truth finally exposed. I stepped out of that house, my step light, as if I had just undone the knot around my heart after all these years. In the days after the confrontation at Lana's house, my life shifted into a strange rhythm, not fast, not slow, but like the ocean after a storm, the waves offshore still strong, but near the shore, the water finally beginning to calm. I left the beach house and rented a small apartment in the next town over, where you could hear trains in the early mornings and smell toasted bread from the bakery down the street. I didn't choose it for convenience. I needed a space far enough to breathe, but close enough to finish what was still unfinished. The most important task was helping the police close the case from 7 years ago. Noah was the lead investigator. We met many times at his office, during evidence reviews, in moments where I realized this man had carried grief so long it had turned into silence. He wasn't like Evan. He didn't try to reassure. He didn't hide fear behind charm. Noah was steady, grounded, with a kind of calm that made people less afraid when talking to him. I arrived at the police station at the scheduled time. Noah was at his desk, reviewing Evan's written statement. He looked up when he saw me walk in, nodding once, no smile, but respect in his eyes. "Thank you for being on time," he said, standing to offer me the chair across from him. I sat down, placing my bag beside me. "I want to help as much as I can. I know this isn't easy for your family." Noah pressed his lips together slightly, as if restraining himself from saying something too personal. I owe you a thank you. You're the only one who dared bring this into the light. Over the years, people forgot. The police gave up. It was just me. And my mother. He paused. But we had no evidence. And you brought it. I looked at the desk, old case files, yellow sticky notes, and a photo of a family of 3 by the lake before the accident. The man in the photo was Walter Green, Noah's father. He wore a leather jacket, smiling wide, his hand resting on the shoulders of his 2 sons. He looks kind, I murmured without thinking. Noah didn't look at the photo, only replied softly. He was the best man I've ever known. The air between us stilled. Not heavy, not sad, just honest. Noah handed me a stack of papers. Lana has been officially charged. The sentence won't be light. As for Evan, he'll be handled as a coerced witness. He'll still be accountable for the cover-up, but not charged with intentional harm. We'll recommend leniency. I nodded. I didn't want Evan to lose his whole life over a mistake he made under pressure. But I also couldn't save our marriage anymore. Noah set his pen down and looked directly at me for the first time that day. Are you okay? I mean, after everything. I'm trying to be, I said. Maybe it'll take time. But I'm not collapsing. I'm just learning to step out of a life I kept assuming was mine. Noah nodded, as if he understood more than anyone else. We met several times over the next 2 weeks, not just to exchange documents but to align statements and prepare for the final confrontation with the prosecution. Each time, Noah received me with his usual calm, but sometimes I caught a rare softness in his eyes when he looked at me. Not the softness of pity, but of respect for someone who had just walked through her own ruins. One afternoon, after a tense meeting, Noah stood outside the police station, hands in his coat pockets, looking at the sky. The wind was cold that day, and yellow leaves blew around like sticky notes swept off a desk. I stepped beside him. Are you still tired? No, Noah said. Just thinking too much. He turned toward me, his voice low. I thought it would take my whole life to know the truth. But it came in a single night. Because of you. I leaned my hands on the short railing in front of the station. I just did what I should have done long ago. No. Noah shook his head. You could have stayed silent. Many people did, but you didn't. People like you are rare. His words unsettled me for a moment, not the kind of unsettled from a compliment, but the kind from realizing someone had seen me for who I truly was. I was sitting in a cafe near my new apartment, a steaming cappuccino in front of me and my laptop half open. Noah walked in, the same dark coat, his hair slightly tousled from the wind. He looked around and saw me. I don't want to bother you, but I need to show you this. He placed an envelope on the table. Official confirmation from the prosecutor, Lana confessed. She'll go to court. But she signed an agreement taking full responsibility. I opened the envelope. There was nothing left to doubt. Everything matched what I had seen on Evan's laptop. And Evan, I asked, he'll only have mandatory work with the police, no charges. Just as I hoped. Noah watched me for a few seconds. You know, some people save a life, but you saved a truth. That sentence made me pause for half a second. Not because of the words, but because of the way he said them, clear, firm, with no flattery, no embellishment. For the first time in a long while, I felt a peace as soft as morning wind, not loud, not borrowed from pain, just quietly present. At the end of our meeting, Noah stood to leave, but turned back, his voice slightly lower than usual. Aurora, if you ever need someone to talk to, I can always listen. I know, no promises. Just 2 people stepping out of different wounds, standing in a small cafe, sharing a moment bright enough to know the past no longer held them. In the days after Lana's arrest, my life shifted to a different pace, slow, safe, and quieter than anything I had known in years. The small apartment I rented suddenly felt like a place where every morning began with the sound of wheels rolling on the street below, the distant horn of a train, and the faint aroma of coffee from the bakery at the corner. I no longer had to guess who Evan was talking to. I no longer lived with the sense that a secret door slammed shut behind me every time I stepped out of a room. Freedom isn't loud. It simply rests a hand on your shoulder and says, "It's finally your turn." Then came a message from Evan. "Can I see you for a moment? One?" I didn't reply immediately. I stared at the words for a long time, like looking at an old acquaintance standing at your door, familiar and distant all at once. Eventually, I typed back. 1 hour, at the cafe by the shore. When I arrived, Evan was already there. He had lost weight, dark circles under his eyes, and the hair he once kept neatly trimmed now hung longer, slightly covering his forehead. He jumped to his feet when he saw me, as if he had waited too long for this moment. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice tired and hoarse. "What do you need?" Evan looked down at the wooden table, his fingers turning the paper cup around. "I just want to say one thing. I'm sorry, not for the cover-up. Not for Lana. But for the years I made you feel alone in your own home." I didn't respond right away. I let him speak. "I know I have no right to ask you to come back. I just want you to know that because of you, I can breathe after everything. You freed me from something I should have faced 7 years ago." "Aurora," Evan said, his voice slowing, soft enough to be carried by the wind, "you never have to apologize for seeing the truth. I know." We sat together for a while longer, no pleading, no promises, no grand gestures. Everything between us ended not in tears, but in a clarity so calm it almost felt unreal. When we stood, Evan said, "I truly hope you find the life you deserve," I replied. "And I hope you learn how to live without needing someone to save you," and that was the last time I saw him, at least in this story. My days afterward softened like the surface of a morning lake. I woke early, walked around the park near my apartment, bought a cappuccino from my favorite shop, and sometimes sat on the balcony watching the treetops sway. No one reached into my past. No one tried to hold me back. No one asked me to explain anything, and that was something I never knew I would cherish so much. During the days working with the police, Noah occasionally stopped by, bringing new information or simply saying, "We need to sign this page." Each time he came, my small apartment felt less quiet but never loud. He appeared like a steady breath, reliable, grounded, asking nothing of me. One afternoon, while I was sorting old files in my workspace, Noah stood at the doorway holding a large folder. "This is the final version. Once you sign, it's done. After today, you won't need to come to the station anymore." I picked up the pen and signed. It felt like closing a long chapter of my life. Noah watched me for a few seconds, then said something I never expected him to say. "Aurora, you didn't just save my brother and me. You saved the truth itself." I looked up. I only did what I should have done from the start. No, if it were anyone else, they'd think, "This is Evan's problem, Lana's problem, not mine." You didn't think that way. You chose to stand on the side of what's right. And no one does that easily. His words didn't overwhelm me with emotion, but they quieted me for a long moment. A warm silence, not painful, not heavy, just a recognition my heart didn't realize it had longed for. As I walked back along the small road leading into the town, the yellow streetlights cast soft, warm patches on the ground. I thought of Lana, of Evan, of the years I tried to keep peace for others while living inside an invisible cage myself. That cage wasn't made of steel. It was made of endurance, of fear of disappointing others, of love placed in the wrong direction. But when a woman like me finally speaks, not necessarily loudly, not shouting, we don't just break the lie. We burn down the cage that held us, so we can finally stand in this life on our own feet. And as I stood on the dark road, listening to the steady rhythm of the waves offshore, I realized that sometimes the truth doesn't come to ruin your life. It comes to open a new door for you to walk through. If you've listened all the way to this point, thank you for walking with me through a journey filled with shadows but also so much light. If this story touched you, please hit like, follow, and subscribe to join me in the next stories. And, where are you watching from? Have you ever had to choose freedom the way I did? Share in the comments below.